UFC 328 is finally here. Chimaev versus Strickland takes place this Saturday at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. And guys, we have a banger card lineup to kick off this whole summer of UFC with UFC White House, Conor McGregor coming back at International Fight Week. Hopefully, the Islam comeback, and we have a huge summer coming up, and it's gonna start right here. Chimaev versus Strickland. This is one of the most anticipated fights of the year. A lot of animosity, a lot of buildup, a lot of negativity. So we're gonna start with the prelims and the early prelim opener of Clayton Carpenter versus Jose Ochoa. This is a compelling matchup for a couple of reasons. I think both of these guys have, their own weaknesses. I think Carpenter's fight IQ is what's lacking and what's stopping him from, gaining some momentum. And then you got Jose Ochoa. I think he got weak takedown defense. He showed that in the Amosov fight, giving up 7 takedowns. But in the striking, he does have that advantage. He knocked out Cody Durden, and he has a really good scrap with Kavanaugh. Even though he lost, Kavanaugh is a great opponent, so there's no shame in that. So it's just who excels in their realm better? Does Carpenter excel in his wrestling, or does Jose Ochoa excel in his striking more? And I think Jose Ochoa excels in his striking better than Carpenter is good at his wrestling. So I have Jose Ochoa by 3rd round knockout. And then moving on up, you got Bison Gore Susurkaev versus Jordan Santos. Interesting fight. Susurkaev is obviously undefeated. He came in here and in the UFC he got that great win on the Contender Series with the teep kick. So I know he has some diverse striking. He was able to knock out Eric Mekonico in his last fight. He showed some great offensive striking skills and some finishing instincts, but he does still lack that striking defense from what I saw. Even in that fight versus Eric Nolan, he got rocked early trying to scrap, but he showed great survivability, and he has some great confidence in him. That's one thing I like. Some people say, oh, he's too full of himself, he's just Hamza's training partner, but confidence takes you a long way. It might cost you a fight here early, but I think he has some great confidence, and I think that'll take him a long way in the long run. Jordan Santos, I don't know if this is supposed to be a step up, because Jordan Santos lost to Ozzy Diaz in a scrap. He lost to Ozzy Diaz, and he beat Danny Barlow in a scrap, who's a decent striker of his own, but I think Susurkaev is just miles ahead of him in terms of finishing ability, and then in striking as well. He has much more of a diverse striking game. So I have Susurkaev by decision. I just think Susurkaev, he might get the finish, but I don't trust him to, honestly. I think defensively, as we get higher level defensively, I think it's going to be much more of a scrap back and forth. But I think Susurkaev has the tools to take this W. So I have Susurkaev by decision here. Moving on up, we have Pat Sabatini versus William Gomis. This is another interesting fight. They're pretty evenly matched up. Sabatini, he has great takedowns, so in the wrestling aspect, he's better. He got 7 takedowns versus Chepe Mariscal in his last fight, and then he beat Joe Brito. He showed great striking and takedown. It was basically a masterclass over Joe Brito, both in striking and in wrestling. And then he got that submission win over Jonathan Pierce. So he's coming off some momentum here. And then Gomis, he got a decent win versus Robert Rachula recently. He's going on. He lost to Hyder Amil, and he got that win over Joe Brito in a split decision. So he's win some, lose some, win some, lose some. And I just think they have one common opponent, right, in the last three fights, and it's Joe Brito. It all comes down to Sabatini dominated Joe Brito. It was a masterclass, whereas William Gomis got a split decision win over Joe Brito. He gave up 3 takedowns. So Sabatini, actually, this isn't. I think this is an easy fight to pick, honestly. When I look at it, when I looked at the statistics, I think Pat Sabatini round 2 submission. I think in the ground it's a mismatch. It's a huge mismatch in the ground. What's the odds? Yeah, almost 2-1 favorite for Pat Sabatini, and that's what I expected. It's just on the feet they're evenly matched, but it's just on the ground that Pat Sabatini just will be too overwhelming, and I have him by finishing the second round. Moving on up, now it gets interesting. Now we got some of the low level fights down. Now it gets interesting. Roman Kopylov versus Marco Tulio. This is interesting because Kopylov, he was promising. When he first came into the UFC, he had some promising. His striking was pretty cool. It was pretty gritty to see. He had some fancy knockouts early, but then he's went on a skid recently. He lost to RoboCop. He got outstruck by RoboCop. It's not like he got knocked out early and we didn't get the striking exchanges. He got outstruck by RoboCop over a 3-round fight. He lost to Costa. He also got outstruck by Costa in a 3-round fight. It's just that Roman Kopylov tends to get very tentative early on. He did get that W over Chris Curtis, but he was getting tagged early. So I think he has tendencies of getting tagged early. I think if you're in a tit for tat battle within league striker, I think Roman Kopylov is going to lose. The only reason he beat Chris Curtis, I think his cardio kept up, whereas Chris Curtis kind of went downhill. Chris Curtis, cut a lot of weight to make. Actually, that was 185. So I think Chris Curtis, cardio failed him in that fight. I think he's a much better striker than Roman Kopylov, but his cardio. If you don't have good cardio, if you struggle late, I think Roman Kopylov has a chance. But I think Marco Tulio is just a way better striker than Roman Kopylov. I think he has the knockout power. He knocked out Ihor Potera in round 1, masterclass striking, and knocked out Gore. And then I know he recently lost to Christian Leroy Duncan. But CLD, he's ranked. He's in the top 15, maybe top 10. And that's a really good striker. It was a power versus power dynamic. And, when it's power versus power and you go in those exchanges, sometimes you tend to be on the losing end of it. And that's what happened to Marco Tulio. But I don't see him struggling too much with Roman Kopylov. I think he will hurt him early and then get him out of there by the second round. So I have a second round TKO for Marco Tulio. Now we're on to the main card. Jim Miller is still fighting, ladies and gentlemen. I know he's trying to make it to UFC 400 and everything, but I say go be a family man. I mean, just look at him in this. He looks like a dad going on to his kids' parent teacher meeting or something. He looks, I don't know, man. Jared Gordon, who's also an unk, but he still has a little more miles left in him. Gordon is coming off a KO loss to Rafa Garcia, in round 3. But before that, he got a KO win over Thiago Moses in round 1, and then split decision loss to Nasrat Hakbaraz. So his opponents are like mid-level opponents. They're not bad, but I think he's still got some miles left in him. Whereas Miller, I think at his age right now, he got horrendous takedown defense at his age. Chase Hooper was able to take him down 8 times. 8 times. He got submitted by Damon Jackson. He submitted Damon Jackson in round 1. So Unk still got some BJJ in him. He can't avoid getting taken down, but on the ground he got some, old man tendencies. He got some what do they call it? Wicked old man strength on the ground. But I would just say he's very tough for his own good. The last time we saw him at UFC 300, he got battered by King Green. So this could go the same way. I just have a hard time seeing Miller beat anybody decent. And Jared Gordon is kind of that mid-level fighter right outside the ranking. He's pretty decent. I just think that Gordon will overwhelm him in the striking, and I have him winning by unanimous decision. So Gordon, UD, unanimous decision, striking masterclass. But what does a striking masterclass mean over Jim Miller? It doesn't mean much, but it's a good fight, I guess. Now we're on to something actually interesting. Grant Dawson versus Matthias Rebecki. Now, this is a hard fight to pick initially before you go in and do some research. Grant Dawson, what stands out to me is that he has a very, very weak chin at this point in his career. He got knocked out by Manuel Torres in round 1. Very recently in his fight, he got some good wrestling though to combat that. He got the unanimous decision win over Diego Ferreira. He got 6 takedowns in that fight. Ground and pound win over Garcia. So he got some decent striking, but no power. So you're not going to see a knockout by Dawson or any huge damage by Dawson on the feet. Maybe he can do some ground and pound and inflict some damage there. But in the stand-up, I just think that this is all Rebecki. Rebecki's a tough son of a gun. He's lost 2 in a row now, but they've been scraps with really good opponents. He lost to Klein in a back and forth war. He did get 2 takedowns on him. And then he lost to Chris Duncan, but that was a scrap. And Chris Duncan is a pretty good opponent. He got 2 takedowns on him, but he did win in a scrap versus Oroblai, and he wasn't getting taken down or anything by Oroblai, who's pretty good in the wrestling aspect. So I just think that Rebecki, he got good takedown defense, right? So I believe in Rebecki's ability to stay upright. I believe in his ability to not get taken down, and I actually have him winning. I have him winning by 3rd round knockout. So Rebecki 3rd round knockout. But this is interesting. Grant Dawson can impose his will in the wrestling, but I just don't see it happening. And then moving right along, Joel Alvarez versus Yaroslav Amosov coming in from Bellator. Amosov just got a huge win versus Neil Magny in round 1. Submitted him and got him out of there. He had a great run in Bellator. He was a former Bellator champion. He did have that KO loss to Jason Jackson where he didn't really look good in the striking. He kind of just was like a fish out the water once he got hurt. Alvarez, He got a good performance over Vicente Luque, even though at the end it got weird, like he wasn't trying to finish him or something. I don't know if he felt bad for Vicente Luque or something, but it was just very, very interesting how he just didn't get him out of there. But early on, he looked great. He looked really good against Dakar Close, got him out of there in round one by knockout, and then he knocked out Elva Brenner by knees. So he's able to switch it up. He got some nice elbows, some nice knees. I think he's able to switch it up in terms of his striking, weapons that he has. And, I think this is another case of a Bellator fighter coming into the UFC and thinking they can just take over versus a Joel Alvarez who's seasoned in the UFC. He's had great runs. I think his only notable loss was to Susurkaev, which is no huge shame in losing to Susurkaev, who's probably the best lightweight in the world. And I know Joel Alvarez is going up to 170, so, you don't really know how he's going to be at this level in this weight class against really good fighters like Amosov, but I really believe in Alvarez's striking. I think he's rangy, and I think he's very patient, and I think he's going to accumulate damage on Amosov, and I have him actually knocking out Amosov. And this is my underground pick, by the way. So I have two underdog. Did I say underground? I meant underdog picks in a row. I have Alvarez as an underdog over Amosov, and then I had Matthias Rebecki winning over Grant Dawson. So two back-to-back underground picks, and I'm pretty confident in this pick in particular. So that'll be interesting to see. This is probably one of my most anticipated fights on this card. So that'll be fun to watch. Next up, Atiba Gautier versus Ozzy Diaz. This is a interesting one because Atiba Gautier looked very, very, very fishy in his last fight, where he was supposed to get Andrei Puliev out of there. He had a good round one, but he did slow down, and he looked like he was struggling a little bit finding Andrei Puliev after the first round. Trying to track him down. He didn't really show a great ability on cutting off the cage. But prior to that, he was just knocking everybody out. But they were all nobodies. They were all cans. I think Andrei Puliev was a slight step up, and he struggled a little bit. But then again, he's facing Ozzy Diaz, guys. He's been knocked out by Zhang Ming Yang round one, knocked out by Joe Pyfer. His only notable win is against Jordan Santos recently in a win in unanimous decision. But Jordan Santos is still a low-level fighter, I would say. So he hasn't proven anything, whereas Gautier at least has proven that he has knockout ability. So I have Gautier round 2 knockout. But, I don't know. Atiba Gautier surprised me in the wrong way in his last fight. But I think that as long as he's fighting these low-level cans, he will keep winning. So I have Atiba Gautier round 2 knockout in this fight. And now we're on to the main card. King Green versus Jeremy Stephens. Why is Jeremy Stephens still fighting in the UFC? I have no idea. I have no clue. But he's here. I don't know if he has something over Dana White or something, why he's still fighting. But I guess he's here. I have King Green by first round knockout. Yeah, first round knockout. I think he's going to get him out of there. King Green showed that Unk still got it. He dominated Daniel Suzel-Huber and knocked him out in the second round, in his last fight. And then he got that split decision win over Lance Gibson Jr. Prior to that, which aged really well, given how Lance performed against Chase Hooper. Obviously, King Green has been knocked out cold before by Rufy last year. But Stephens is coming off a 6-fight losing streak. And he just fought Mason Jones last year. He got outstruck and dominated by Mason Jones, which, Mason Jones is okay. He's pretty good, actually. But prior to that, he didn't fight since 2021. So he took, a 4-year hiatus. And in 2021, he hasn't fought since then because he was getting his ass whooped in 2021. Submitted by Gamrot in round 1. Knocked out by Calvin Kattar early. I don't know, man. This guy I don't know why he has a main card slot. Maybe because he tends to be in fun fights or whatever. But I just have King Green getting him out of there early. This will be a quick one, guys, I think. Next up, okay, now we're getting on to the big-time fights, guys. We have Sean Brady versus Joaquin Buckley. And this is my lock of the card. This is, I think, the easiest fight to predict stylistically, right? Buckley got absolutely dominated by Kamaru Usman in the wrestling his last fight. Horrible takedown defense, no ability to get up. We're talking about an old man Usman with no knees or anything. And he was just able to have his way in the wrestling against Buckley. I was surprised by that, by the way, given how Buckley performed against Kobe Covington prior to that. He was able to, dominate Kobe in the striking and then show great takedown defense. But I just think this proved that Kobe was just washed, whereas Usman still has some miles left in him. But then prior to that, he had that fight with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, which also showed his deficiency in striking because he got outclassed early by Stephen Wonderboy. And he had to, go to the wrestling. and he did end up getting the knockout. He does have immense power in his hands. He has immense power in his hands. That's what I give Buckley. He has immense power. And then you look at Brady. Yeah, he got, it was a tough loss against Morales in New York last year. But I think Morales is just a different breed in terms of his size and how rangy he is. And I think Morales is built different in terms of genetically. That dude is a freak of nature. But besides that, prior to that, he got a submission win against Leon Edwards, which is, I think, Brady's most masterclass win and performance. Beat Leon Edwards in the wrestling and posed his will. And I think that's how Sean Brady has to fight Joaquin Buckley, and that's how I think he would do Joaquin Buckley. Because Leon Edwards has better takedown defense compared to Joaquin Buckley. Leon Edwards is actually known to have good wrestling, and Joaquin Buckley proved that he has no wrestling at all in his last fight. So based on that, I think this is the easiest pick of the card. I don't think Brady will finish him, but I think Brady will be able to control him on the ground easily. So I have a unanimous decision win, Sean Brady, 30-27 across the board. Maybe even a 30-26, guys. Yeah, maybe even maybe a 110-8 round in there. I think this is the easiest fight to pick in the card, in my opinion, just based on stylistically. And then moving on to the featured fight of the card, Alexander Volkov versus Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Waldo Cortes, he's coming off some great momentum recently. He's on a really good winning streak. He knocked out Lewis in a pretty weird fight recently, but he's really powerful. That was a weird fight. That was a strange fight, but he was able to at the end, I guess showcase his power. But it looked like Lewis just gave up from what it looks like. Prior to that, Cortes knocked out Shamil Gaziev. Shamil Gaziev actually has a pretty decent chin based on his last couple of fights. So being able to knock out Shamil Gaziev, but Shamil Gaziev is a blob. He doesn't really have that much cardio, but. And then prior to that, he knocked out Ante Deligia. Another weird fight with the whole eye poke thing, and then coming back and knocking him out. So one thing we all know is that Cortes-Acosta has dynamite in his hands. He's pretty powerful heavyweight. And then Alexander Volkov, he is coming off a robbery win over Almeida. I think Almeida won that fight. Very boring fight, but Almeida got 7 takedowns, which isn't great for Volkov, but he's fighting Waldo Cortes, who isn't really much of a wrestler, so I don't think that would translate. But then before that, he beat Cyril Gane, even though on the scorecards he lost. So he showed that he has elite striking in the heavyweight division. Same with his performance against Pavlovich. So that's a common opponent they have. Volkov masterclass Pavlovich, whereas Pavlovich beat Waldo Cortes-Acosta. So I think this is just going to be a striking matchup. And in that sense, I have Volkov winning. I don't see Volkov getting knocked out by Cortes-Acosta because I think Volkov is a high-level striker. So he will just avoid that with his range and his angles. I don't think he'll let just the same way he performed against Pavlovich. Pavlovich is a powerful striker, so if he's able to implement a similar game plan, I think he'll win. So this might be this is a hard fight because Cortes, if you let Cortes catch you, it might be a good night for you. But I believe in Alexander Volkov, guys. I think he's really, really good and very improved. So I have Alexander Volkov by unanimous decision. Moving on up, guys, to the co-main event of the evening, Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira. This is very interesting, right? So Joshua Van, coming off that win against Pantoja that obviously I won't talk about too much because of the injury thing, so that doesn't really count in my books. But before that, he's coming off the fight of the year versus Brandon Royval. Before that, obviously showed great striking in that fight, back and forth. But in the end, just his variety in striking, those kicks to the knees, those oblique kicks at the end, just showed like his range of striking arsenal that he has. He has a wide range of he's able to go to the body, to the head. He's able to kick. So that's what he showed. And then before that, showed masterclass against Bruno Silva and was able to knock him out and get him out of there. He showed good get-ups when he gets taken down. I think Bruno Silva was able to take him down, but Van showed good get-ups, especially in that fight he had against Ray Tsuruya, I believe his name is. Ray Tsuruya was able to get him down a couple times, but I think Joshua Van showed that he can hold his own in the grappling and be able to get up, and then also be able to get up on his feet and impose his will in the striking. Now, Taira, I think that his run is interesting, right? Recently, he dominated Brandon Moreno, who is not aging the best because Brandon Moreno just fought, who was it, Kavanaugh, and got dominated. So I just think Brandon Moreno at this point is past, the Brandon Moreno that we used to know, the champion level fighter Brandon Moreno. I think Moreno's past his prime. So, I won't take nothing away from Taira. He did dominate him, but, we got to look at where Brandon Moreno is at his career. Prior to that, he dominated Hussein Park on short notice for Park. He did dominate him on the feet as well, and then once he got him on the ground, it was game over for Park. But then the most interesting fight for Taira is his fight with Brandon Royval. He showed good wrestling early, but he couldn't find the submission. And then against an elite level fighter, over 5 rounds, he had horrible striking defense, and he just looked like a deer in headlights against Brandon Royval on the feet, and he lost that one pretty bad. So based on that, I think Joshua Van has been there against elite level fighters and showed grit and showed heart. So I have Joshua Van stylistically being able to beat Taira. I think Taira's most recent run, even though it looks good, I think that when you put it under a microscope, he beat Hansung Park, who just lost to Bruno Silva and got dominated by Bruno Silva and finished on the ground, submitted on the ground by Bruno Silva. How big of a win was that, against Hansung Park? And then how big of a win was against Brandon Moreno, who showed that he's past his prime? And then he lost, and then Tatsuro Taro lost to Brandon Royval in the striking and wasn't able to keep him down or submit him. So I think this is a pretty obvious pick. I think Joshua Van will win. I'm very surprised he's an underdog in this fight, but he is. I guess that's free money. But I have Joshua Van by round 4 TKO. Round 4 TKO. I think Tatsuro Taro might be able to get him down early and control him for a little bit, but in the striking, I think it's a huge mismatch, and I just have Joshua Van by knockout there. And then we get on to the main event of the evening. This is a very, very interesting fight, guys. Very interesting fight because it can go one of two ways, right? I think it could go one of two ways. Chimaev, early submission, round 1 or round 2 submission. Or this could go long, guys. If this goes 5 rounds, I don't see a way Sean Strickland loses a 5-round battle to Hamza Chimaev, because I don't see Chimaev being able to keep Sean Strickland down round 4 and round 5, just based on their pace and based on stylistically. Strickland and DDP are not the same. DDP, prior to fighting Chimaev, when everybody did their tape study, we all saw the same thing. DDP wrestling is he has pretty good offensive wrestling. I wouldn't say pretty good, but he can impose his will offensively in terms of the wrestling. He can get a takedown, but defensively he is horrendous. And we saw that against Hamza Chimaev. He just wasn't able to keep Hamza Chimaev off of him in the wrestling aspect. Whereas Sean Strickland has proven great, amazing takedown defense. If you look at his last fight against Fluffy, he dominated Fluffy. Showed great takedown defense, didn't get taken down. And he outstruck Fluffy and got him out of there. He did. We all know Sean Strickland's fight with DDP. I think DDP made better adjustments on the striking. So if Strickland faces someone with a dynamic striking game, that's where he could lose. But I think Chimaev did dominate DDP in the wrestling. He got 12 takedowns on him, 20 plus minutes of ground control. Prior to that, he dominated Whitaker, got him out of there, submitted him in round 1. And then the Usman fight was interesting. He did dominate Usman in round 1 with the wrestling. But then I think that's when Chimaev broke his hand, so he slowed down. But he does have a tendency of slowing down and then showing bad striking defense. But I just really believe in Chimaev's wrestling. Right? I believe in Chimaev's wrestling, and I believe that he recognizes Sean Strickland is a threat, as the fight elongates. And I think that he will maximize his efforts in trying to get Strickland out of there. He's already proven to himself in the gym against Sean Strickland, against those sparring sessions, that he's able to submit him. I know that those sessions started on the ground and there were other factors going on, but he has proven to himself that he can submit Sean Strickland, right? If he gets in those positions, and I think he will go for it. And I have Chimaev round 1 or round 2 submission, guys. That's the route I'm taking, and I'm confident in that. But Strickland can make it interesting. For no doubt, Strickland can make this interesting. I'm not doubting Strickland at all, but I think that Chimaev's wrestling is on another level. But yeah, guys, that's my predictions for UFC 328. Comment down below what you guys think. What you guys do you disagree with any picks I made? Do you guys have your own sleeper picks? I would love to know that. So drop that down in the comments. And until next time, I'm out.